Hello, my name is Tracy German, and I'm an Indigenous filmmaker of the Haudenosaunee Mohawk Nation from Southern Ontario, Miigwech, Pitamaye, Nawe. I was hired by Sheridan to contribute to the mediaization of Indigenous knowledge and, where necessary, redesign curriculum to reflect my Indigenous knowledge and my production media experience within the BFTV program and the Media Fundamentals departments that I teach. As a professor, I bring an Indigenous worldview and a feminist value system that seeks an alternative model to the patriarchal or entitlement paradigm that frequently prevails in the classroom. And here we have a medicine wheel and the pedagogy that goes into that, as well a proverb that I also feel near and dear to my heart. I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, but I learn what I do. My teaching philosophy is cyclical, starting with an overview of me and my filmmaking practice as I situate myself as a professor within the context of I learn what I do at each stage of my career, and how experiential knowledge is embedded in my teaching philosophy, the courses that I teach, and the lessons plans and assignments that I develop. So part one, context, decentering, Eurocentric media histories, and the mediaization of Indigenous knowledge. The first major overhaul of content was for the media history course that I teach within the Media Fundamentals program. In looking over the existing material, it became clear that I needed to compile course materials that would better represent the diversity of media history and connect these histories to current timely issues such as Indigenous, language revitalization, land defense, the Black Lives Matter movement, violence against women, to name just a few significant issues explored through an examination of media history. Rather than emphasizing white male inventor and the pursuit of progress, I shifted the focus towards the significance of these developments in media technology, as well as implications of media technologies, such as the role of the telegraph in colonization of the Western frontier, and the role of independent user-generated media in activism and ongoing struggles for equality. Alongside decentering white male, Eurocentric canon, I wove Indigenous ways of knowing and content throughout the course, including my own experiences as an Indigenous writer, director, producer, and artist. I exposed my students to my work in television broadcasting and Indigenous representation, showing episodes of wild archaeology that fit thematically with the content I was teaching, emphasizing the significance of oral history, part two, pedagogical actions and rationale. As part of this process of decolonizing the curriculum, I focused on curriculum changes, as well as redesigning the assignments and evaluations. I also consulted with Indigenous academics whose expertise lies in the intersection of colonialism, decolonization, and pedagogy. All learners have the ability to learn, and the task of education is to establish an environment that evokes critical thought and passion to overcome fears, blockages, and resistance to difficult learning. With this in mind, I sought to encourage students to reflect, discuss, and relate their knowledge to each other and the world around them, as well as to inspire them to find their own research topics that related to the course themes. I sought to counter cognitive imperialism as much as possible by updating and indigenizing the content, and by focusing on reflective discussions and assignments, encouraging students to engage deeply with the material and connect it with their own lives and experiences, and to expand students' knowledge of the privilege and oppression, colonialism and resistance, and the world around them. And these ads represent the pervasiveness of racism and the ideas of white supremacy in an era of slavery and Indigenous genocide. I discussed these ads in the context of early 19th century and asked, what role do these ads play in normalizing racism and dehumanizing the Black people, in perpetuating colonialism? I condensed and cut information that could be constructed as Eurocentric, disrespectful to Indigenous peoples, including slides critiquing disadvantages of oral history and or stripping oral histories to a list of advantages, a list of advantages that cannot fully encapsulate their importance. I removed material emphasizing progress and the expansion of the frontier, and instead emphasized the role of the telegraph and railway in colonization of North America, discussing consequences of these technologies, developments for white settlers, Indigenous peoples, and Chinese laborers. This lecture also included more context on colonial dispossession, the Indian Removal Act, the Treaty of Laramie, Wounded Knee, and Chinese head tax. I updated material on print journalism and advertisements to explore race and racism, civil rights, the Black Lives Matter movement, as well as violence against women, pedophilia, Jeffrey Epstein, and Indigenous resistance at Mount Rushmore. While discussing the history of film and television, I highlighted gender-based violence, sexual assault, and power through discussion of Bill Cosby and the Me Too movement. While discussing stereotypes in the media, I focused not only on gender, race, and sexuality, but also drew attention to often overlooked stereotypes related to disability. And these are examples from my teaching, where I asked students, how is disability portrayed in media, and give examples? And how does mass media produce meaning? Who controls representation in the mass media? How are stereotypes naturalized? And how can we interrogate dominant representations? So these are examples from my lectures. While discussing radio history, I added a section about CBC's preservation of Indigenous languages, as well as a section on Martin Luther King Jr. regarding the importance of Black radio and the civil rights movement, encouraging students to make their own connections with Black Lives Matter and Indigenous language revitalization in the present context. I updated the section on broadcast news to provide students with current significant social justice related examples of soft news, hard news, and investigative journalism, including young Black artists challenging stereotypes through digital art, the overrepresentation of Black and Indigenous people in deadly encounters with police in Canada, as well as migrant farm workers' living conditions in Canada during COVID-19. In terms of redesigning assignments, I had students focus on reflective discussion questions rather than quizzes or exams. I also assigned them 2 short 500-word reflective essay papers, each worth 20% of their grade. For the first essay, I asked students to discuss the social effects and implications of media. I encouraged students to choose their own original topic, but also provided some themes for inspiration, including gender and violence, race and racism, media as a tool for oppression, media as a tool for change, colonialism, decolonization, media, and the civil rights movement, and children and advertising. I also had students write a sample script for broadcast news in the class to ensure they understood the format. And for their final essay, I had students write a topic of their choice related to global media. I gave students several examples: state control versus commercial media, local impacts of global media, media ownership, and consolidation, as well as what happens when the media's priority is profit. In terms of continued practice, I have already begun to implement similar changes and strategies in my other courses, continually assessing and revising topical outlines for inclusivity. Additionally, my own self-reflection is an ongoing process, understanding and confronting my own biases as I encourage students to self-reflect and understand their biases. The challenge remains to find balance. And coming full circle, back to the medicine wheel pedagogy, the following diagram is informed by Cree elder Michael Thrasher, giving us the 4 cardinal directions. East, the gift of vision, found where one is able to see. South, where one spends time which to relate to the vision. West, one uses the gift of reason to figure it out. And north, one uses a gift of movement to do or actualize the vision. Miigwech, Pitamaye, Nawe. As a filmmaker and educator, I'm constantly inspired by the energy and ideas of students and welcome the opportunity to continue to share what I know within this dynamic institution.